The sun was just setting over Earth when Commander Nathaniel Wells was called to a secret meeting with Earth's governing body. He had been chosen for an assignment unlike any other. The Yvra Empire, a highly advanced alien civilization, had requested a human representative to mediate peace talks regarding a galactic dispute that had been escalating for decades. It was a momentous honor, but also one that carried immense responsibility. Nathaniel was no diplomat. He was a military strategist, someone used to making split-second decisions in the heat of battle, not a negotiator with the poise to sway the decisions of intergalactic empires. But the Council had chosen him, and with little more than a cryptic briefing on the Yvra, he was sent to their homeworld. The journey took several weeks aboard an advanced transport ship, the hum of its engines providing a steady rhythm as the vastness of space passed in endless stretches of black. Nathaniel spent most of the journey in solitude, learning about the Yvra, an ancient, elegant species known for their superior intellect, beauty, and mysticism. They were a peaceful people, but their technology and knowledge dwarfed humanity's by eons. When Nathaniel finally arrived on the Yvra homeworld, the sight was nothing like he had expected. The capital city was a sprawling marvel of shimmering towers and glowing pathways. Alien architecture that seemed to defy gravity and physics greeted him, as if the city had been built by a civilization that had long mastered the forces of the universe. The ship landed softly, and Nathaniel was escorted by a group of Yvra ambassadors to the central palace. His mind raced with questions. What did the Yvra want from Earth? What had prompted this sudden request for a human representative? Was it truly peace they were after, or did they have something more in mind? Inside the grand halls of the palace, he was introduced to Princess Celestia, the youngest daughter of the Yvra Emperor. She stood tall, her presence commanding yet serene. Her long silver hair cascaded down her back, and her eyes glimmered like twin stars. Her beauty was otherworldly, but it was the way she looked at Nathaniel that struck him the most: curiosity, wonder, and perhaps something deeper. She spoke with grace, her voice like a melody, yet there was an edge to her words, a warning. "The peace we seek is not easily won, Commander Wells," she said, her gaze unwavering. "You must be prepared for what lies ahead." As they exchanged pleasantries, Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her words. Was she speaking of the political situation, or did her gaze imply something more? He was about to find out. The night fell upon the Yvra capital, a city that shimmered beneath the twin moons, casting an ethereal glow on the towering spires of the palace. Nathaniel stood on a balcony overlooking the sprawling metropolis, the wind carrying a hint of unfamiliar fragrances from the alien plants below. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, both beautiful and daunting at the same time. This was not just an alien world. This was a place of power, history, and mystery. Princess Celestia had invited him to a formal banquet that evening, a gesture of goodwill, or so she said. As they made their way through the palace's grand halls, the walls were adorned with murals depicting the Yvra's history. Battles fought, alliances formed, and empires expanded. Despite their immense power, the Yvra had never sought to conquer, choosing instead to influence the galaxy through knowledge and subtlety. The banquet was set in an enormous hall, with a long, gleaming table at its center, surrounded by delicate chairs crafted from materials that seemed to shift and shimmer as one moved past them. Nathaniel felt out of place, his Earth-made uniform starkly contrasting with the luxurious attire of the Yvra guests. Despite his discomfort, he kept his posture straight, reminding himself that he was there for a reason. Celestia appeared at the head of the table, her presence commanding the room. Her long silver hair shimmered in the light, and her skin seemed to glow with an almost otherworldly radiance. She was a princess in every sense, regal, graceful, and undeniably beautiful. Yet there was something in her eyes, a depth of emotion that Nathaniel couldn't quite place. She greeted him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her words polite but distant. "Commander Wells, I trust your journey was not too taxing," she asked, her voice smooth and melodic. "The Yvra can offer more than just technological advancements. We have a culture of art, philosophy, and peace that you will experience firsthand tonight." Nathaniel nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. There was a tension between them, unspoken but palpable. He had been briefed on the purpose of his visit, to mediate peace talks between warring factions within the Yvra Empire. but his instincts told him that there was more to this than mere diplomacy. The Yvra were a proud and intelligent people, but there was an underlying current of something darker, something that wasn't being said. As they sat at the banquet table, a delicate dish of fruits and strange meats was placed in front of Nathaniel. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. The food was nothing like he had ever tasted, the textures and flavors completely foreign. But he forced himself to take a bite, unwilling to appear disrespectful. The Yvra observed him closely, their eyes flickering with curiosity. Celestia watched him, her gaze intense and unwavering. "Do you enjoy our food, Commander?" she asked, her tone light, but there was a weight behind the question. "It is said that food can connect us to the essence of a planet. What does Earth's food say about your people?" Nathaniel was taken aback by the question. What did Earth's food say about humanity? He thought about it for a moment. "It's simple yet comforting," he replied. "We use food to gather, to share stories, to bond with one another. Our food tells a story of survival, of working together to overcome hardship." Celestia's eyes softened slightly, though her expression remained unreadable. "And yet, humanity's survival has come at a great cost. Wars, suffering, loss. Do you think that in time Earth will overcome these shadows?" Nathaniel paused, considering her question carefully. "We try," he said after a moment. "We try to be better, to learn from our mistakes." Celestia nodded slowly, her gaze turning distant for a brief moment. "The Yvra too have learned, but not without sacrifice, and sometimes even knowledge comes at a price." The conversation shifted then, as other guests joined in, speaking of the various aspects of the galaxy and the Yvra's place within it. But Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that Celestia's words had been more than just idle conversation. There was something deeper, something she wasn't saying, but he wasn't sure what it was. Later that night, as the banquet wound down, Celestia led him to the palace's observation deck. The stars above them seemed so close, so real, that it felt like they could reach out and touch them. Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat as he looked up at the vast expanse of space. "The Yvra have studied the stars for millennia," Celestia said, her voice soft, almost wistful. "We understand the universe in ways no other species can. We've seen worlds rise and fall, civilizations flourish and crumble. We've learned much, but even we are not immune to the forces that shape the cosmos." Nathaniel turned to look at her, but she was already gazing out at the stars, her expression unreadable. There was a sadness there, a weight that seemed to burden her more than anything else. "What do you mean?" he asked gently, stepping closer. Celestia hesitated, then met his eyes. "The peace we seek is not just a political negotiation," she said quietly. "It is something far more complicated. The factions within the Empire are not just fighting for power. They are fighting for survival. There are forces at play here that go beyond mere politics. I fear that if we do not act quickly, the consequences could be catastrophic." Nathaniel's heart skipped a beat. The stakes were higher than he had realized. The Yvra were not just embroiled in a political struggle. They were facing a threat that could unravel their entire civilization. "How can I help?" Nathaniel asked, his voice firm. He had been sent here to mediate, to help broker peace, but this was more than just a diplomatic mission. This was a call to action. Celestia turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "I don't know yet," she said softly. "But perhaps you are the one who can help us find the way." As the night wore on, Nathaniel felt the weight of his mission press down on him. The journey ahead would be anything but easy. There were no simple answers, no quick solutions. But for the first time, he felt a sense of purpose, a determination to help the Yvra, and perhaps, in doing so, help Earth as well. The universe was vast, filled with unknowns, but Nathaniel was ready. He would face whatever came next, and he would do it with the strength of humanity behind him. The next few days were filled with a whirlwind of meetings, discussions, and strategy sessions. Nathaniel found himself in the heart of the Yvra Empire's political drama, an outsider in a world of ancient traditions and high-stakes diplomacy. Princess Celestia had become his guide through this alien world, though he couldn't shake the feeling that there were parts of her, parts of the truth, that she was holding back. Their meetings were intense. Celestia's presence was commanding, her every word chosen with care, and Nathaniel had learned quickly that the Yvra were not a people to be underestimated. The Empire had been in a state of tension for decades, and now, with Earth involved, the stakes were higher than ever. The factions within the Yvra Empire were divided, each seeking control of the galaxy's future. But there were darker forces at play, something far more dangerous than political power struggles. During one of their late-night discussions, Nathaniel found himself alone with Celestia in a quiet chamber, the glow of distant stars casting a soft light through the windows. She was seated at a large desk, her face illuminated by the flickering holograms of maps and data. The room was silent, save for the hum of the ship's engine in the distance. "I didn't ask for this responsibility," Celestia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted to rule this empire. I never wanted to carry this burden." Nathaniel studied her, sensing the weight in her words. He had always known that power came with its own set of challenges, but there was something in Celestia's tone that suggested a deeper struggle. She was more than just a princess. She was the future of her people, the one who would decide the fate of the galaxy. "I understand," he replied, his voice soft. "But you're doing your best. No one can ask for more than that." She turned her gaze to him, her eyes searching his face as if looking for something. "But what if my best isn't enough? What if I fail my people? The Yvra have been in power for millennia, but we are not invincible. Our enemies are growing stronger, and the alliances we've built are fragile at best. I fear that this empire, this civilization, it is already crumbling." Nathaniel felt a pang of sympathy for her. She was not the unapproachable princess he had initially thought her to be. She was human in her vulnerability, just as he was. But there was something in her that drove her to fight, to protect her people no matter the cost, and that was something he admired. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said, his voice steady. "We're all in this together, Celestia. Earth may be a young and inexperienced species in the grand scheme of things, but we're strong, and we'll stand by you." She looked away for a moment, her expression softening. "Thank you, Nathaniel," she whispered. "But the danger we face, it is not just political. There is something much darker at play here." Before he could respond, the door to the chamber opened, and a Yvra officer entered, his expression grave. "Your Highness, Commander Wells, we've received new intelligence," he said, his voice clipped. "There has been a disturbance in the outer sectors. One of the factions has begun to mobilize forces. They're preparing for war." Celestia's eyes widened in disbelief. "So it begins," she muttered. "The peace we've worked so hard for, it's slipping through our fingers." Nathaniel could feel the tension in the air. This was no longer a simple diplomatic mission. The fate of the Yvra Empire, and possibly humanity, was on the line. He glanced at Celestia, whose expression was one of both determination and fear. She had known this day would come, but knowing didn't make the reality any easier. "Tell me everything," Nathaniel said, his tone firm. "What's going on in the outer sectors?" The officer placed a hologram on the table, displaying a map of the galaxy. One of the outer planets was highlighted in red, indicating it was under attack. The faction known as the Xerian Alliance has mobilized their fleet. They've launched a full-scale assault on the planet Alara, which is a key strategic location. If they succeed, they'll control the entire eastern quadrant of the galaxy. Celestia clenched her fists, her jaw tight with frustration. "The Xerian Alliance, they've always been a threat, but I didn't expect them to act so soon." Nathaniel studied the hologram, his mind racing. "What can we do? Do we have any forces to counter this attack?" The officer shook his head. "The Yvra fleet is spread too thin, Commander. We've already committed forces to securing our borders, and many of our ships are tied up with internal conflicts. We're in no position to engage the Xerian fleet head-on." Nathaniel turned to Celestia, his thoughts racing. "We may have to act quickly and decisively. If we don't, the Xerian Alliance will gain a powerful foothold. We can't afford to lose this war before it even starts." Celestia's gaze met his, and for the first time he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You're right," she said, her voice steady. "We'll need to form alliances, diplomatic, military, whatever it takes. We must act now before it's too late." For the first time since his arrival on the Yvra homeworld, Nathaniel felt a sense of clarity. He wasn't just here to mediate peace. He was here to help lead a war, to guide the Yvra through their darkest hour. And he was ready for whatever came next. In the days that followed, Nathaniel and Celestia worked tirelessly to prepare for the conflict ahead. They contacted leaders from other alien civilizations, seeking allies in the coming struggle. But the more they learned, the more they realized that the Xerian Alliance was not the only threat. There were whispers of a dark force, an ancient enemy that had been stirring in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Nathaniel could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on his shoulders. He had been thrust into a battle far beyond anything he had imagined. But one thing was clear. He would fight, not just for the Yvra, but for the future of Earth and all the civilizations that depended on the fragile peace they had fought so hard to achieve. As the war preparations continued, Nathaniel found himself growing closer to Celestia. Despite the gravity of the situation, there were moments when they would share a quiet conversation, a brief escape from the chaos around them. In those moments, Nathaniel saw the true depth of Celestia's heart, her vulnerability, her strength, and her unwavering commitment to her people. But with each passing day, the shadows grew longer and the stakes higher. There was no turning back now. The war was coming, and the fate of the galaxy rested in their hands. The days leading up to the battle were tense, filled with preparations and strategizing. Nathaniel had never imagined himself as a military leader, but in the face of an impending war, he found himself taking on a role he had never expected. The Yvra, with their centuries of knowledge and wisdom, had a strategy that seemed flawless, but Nathaniel could see the cracks. The Xerian alliance was more powerful than they had anticipated, and their tactics were brutal. Celestia was with him every step of the way, her resolve stronger than ever. She had become more than just a ruler to him. She had become a partner in this struggle, someone he could rely on. She wasn't just the princess of the Yvra, she was a symbol of hope, of defiance, in a galaxy that was quickly falling into chaos. One evening, as they stood in the command center overlooking the battle fleet's preparations, Nathaniel turned to her. "You know, I never thought I'd be here," he said quietly. "I never imagined Earth would be involved in something like this." Celestia looked at him, her gaze soft but steady. "No one ever imagines war, Commander, but it is often inevitable. And now that it's here, we must face it head-on, together." She turned back to the holographic map of the galaxy, where red lights blinked ominously over the Xerian strongholds. The Yvra fleet was ready, but it wasn't enough. They needed allies, and fast. "We've contacted everyone we could," Celestia continued, her voice resolute. "The Gorthan Confederacy, the Illyrians, even the humans, but not everyone has responded. Some have already made their allegiances clear." Nathaniel nodded. "The Xerian alliance is dangerous. If we don't act quickly, they'll overrun everything." There was a brief silence between them, the weight of the situation hanging in the air like a thick fog. Nathaniel could feel the pressure mounting, the realization that this wasn't just a war for the Yvra, but for all of them. The balance of power in the galaxy was at stake, and if they failed, it could mean the end of everything they had worked so hard to protect. "We will win," Celestia said suddenly, her voice fierce, as if trying to convince herself as much as him. "We have to, for my people, for yours, for the future." Nathaniel's gaze lingered on her, seeing not just the princess, but the woman who had become something much more in his eyes. He had watched her grow stronger with every passing day, and in that moment he realized just how much he admired her. She wasn't just a ruler, she was a fighter just like him, and together they would fight. The battle began just before dawn. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as the Yvra fleet moved into position, their ships sleek and glowing with the power of an ancient civilization. The Xerian ships, massive and imposing, waited on the opposite side, their weapons ready to unleash destruction. Nathaniel stood at the command center once again, his heart pounding in his chest as the battle unfolded before him. The holographic map displayed the chaos in real time, ships darting across the screen, explosions lighting up the dark expanse of space as the two fleets collided. The battle was fierce, the Yvra holding their ground with strategic precision. But the Xerian forces were relentless, pushing forward with an aggression that seemed unending. Nathaniel's eyes flicked between the map and Celestia, whose face remained calm despite the turmoil around them. "This is where we make our stand," Celestia said, her voice steady. "We cannot afford to lose this fight." Nathaniel nodded, his fingers twitching at his side. He wasn't a fighter in the traditional sense, but he knew what had to be done. The Yvra needed to hold their position, but they couldn't do it alone. The Illyrians had promised support, but the Gorthan Confederacy was still undecided, and their response would come too late to affect the outcome of this battle. "We need to make a push," Nathaniel said, his voice firm. "We can't wait for reinforcements. We need to break through their defenses now." Celestia met his gaze, her eyes narrowing in determination. "You're right, we must act, but we must do it carefully." She turned to her officers, giving rapid orders in a language Nathaniel couldn't understand, though he didn't need to. He could see the urgency in her movements, the sharpness of her decisions. She wasn't just a princess. She was a leader in every sense of the word. The hours that followed were a blur. Nathaniel found himself caught in the whirlwind of the battle, his mind focused on one thing: survival. The Yvra ships were holding strong, but they were losing ground. The Gerian alliance had deployed new weapons, far more advanced than anything they had seen before, and the Yvra were struggling to counter them. In the heat of the chaos, Nathaniel found himself in a small fighter craft, the hum of the engines vibrating through his body as he maneuvered through the wreckage of destroyed ships. The craft was small, fast, and agile, perfect for getting in close and delivering the kind of strike that could turn the tide of the battle. Celestia's voice crackled through the comms, calm and commanding. "Commander, you have the clearance to strike. Take down their flagship. It's the heart of their fleet. If we can destroy it, we will break their command structure." Nathaniel's heart raced as he locked onto the massive Gerian flagship. It loomed ahead, a dark behemoth surrounded by smaller ships. He could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins as he lined up his shot, his fingers hovering over the controls. "This is it," he muttered to himself. "We end this now." With a deep breath, he pressed the trigger, and the small fighter's weapons released in a barrage of laser fire, cutting through the dark expanse of space and slamming into the Gerian flagship. The explosion was immense, a burst of light that sent shockwaves through the surrounding ships. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then the comms erupted with voices, shouting, orders being given, confusion and chaos. The Gerian fleet was faltering, their flagship destroyed, their command structure in disarray. Back at the command center, Celestia watched as the tide of the battle began to shift. The Yvra forces were holding their ground, their ships cutting through the Gerian ranks with renewed vigor. The battle was far from over, but the victory was within reach. "We've done it," Celestia said, her voice quiet but filled with relief. "The Gerian fleet is in disarray. We have a chance to win this war." Nathaniel stood beside her, his eyes scanning the map. "It's not over yet," he said, his voice steady. "But we've taken the first step. We need to push forward now while they're weak." As the battle raged on, Nathaniel and Celestia continued to lead, their resolve stronger than ever. The Yvra were fighting not just for their empire, but for their future. And Nathaniel was fighting for something even greater, for the survival of both humanity and the galaxy as a whole. With the Gerian forces on the brink of collapse, the Yvra had won a crucial victory. But the war was far from over. There were still many challenges ahead, and Nathaniel knew that the real test would come when the dust settled. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of relief. The battle had been won. And in the quiet of the command center, as the sounds of the ongoing war echoed in the distance, Nathaniel turned to Celestia. "We did it," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Celestia returned the smile, her eyes shining with a mixture of exhaustion and hope. "We did. And now we rebuild."